How many times have you seen lists all over the internet of the so-called worst cars of all time? I can't even count how many times I've seen these articles featuring what a lot of people consider the worst automobiles the world has ever seen. A lot of these tend to feature the same cars over and over. The Chrysler TC by Maserati, the Cadillac Cimarron, the Ford Pinto, the AMC Pacer, anything Daewoo pooped out during the 2000s, and all the ones that you're probably tired of hearing about. However, there's one car that is also a frequent guest in these roundups of automotive atrocities, and one that can never seem to catch a break from all the hate it gets. The Yugo. The Zastava Yugo, also known as the Zastava Coral 45, is a small compact automobile that was offered by Yugoslav or Serbian automaker Zastava being the Serbian word for flag, from 1980 all the way until 2008. Even though the Yugo was made primarily to serve the Balkans, this Yugoslav legend would eventually reach the western part of the world too. This included the United States. You might have heard this story already, so here's a quick recap. American businessman Malcolm Bricklin is most known for his penchant to import and manufacture unusual vehicles towards the end of the 20th century. He's the man behind the failed sports car experiment known as the Bricklin SV1, and he's also responsible for Subaru's introduction to North America. As luck would have it, Bricklin is the guy who brought the Yugo to North America as well, through his company International Automobile Importers. Though Yugo was simply the model name in its homeland of Yugoslavia, in North America, Yugo was the brand and the model. No Zastava here. North America first got a taste of the Yugo GV, as it was named over there, at the LA Auto Show in 1984. The GV, standing for Great Value, debuted at the low price of $4,500, which was even less than America's other bargain basement automotive laughingstock, the Geo Metro. Adjusted for inflation, the Yugo GV debuted at the equivalent of about $13,700 in 1984. Power came from either a 900-ish cc carbureted 4-cylinder engine with 45 horsepower or a 1.1-liter carbureted 4-cylinder with 55 horsepower. It wasn't very fast, it didn't have a lot of equipment, but it could get you from point A to point B. The Yugo did alright for most of its time in North America. However, the fall of Yugoslavia, combined with the massive recall of all 126,000 Yugos sold in North America due to violating emissions regulations, 25 years before VW made it cool, meant that importing and sales ceased in 1992. Now, for most Westerners, this is where the story ends. But I'm not a Westerner. I'm from the Balkans, where the Yugo enjoyed about 95% of its success. So now it's time for me to give you the other side of the Yugo story, and why I think the constant slander of the Yugo is just wrong. While North America would never see anything from Zastava after 1992, the Yugo did just fine in the newly independent former Yugoslav countries. Eventually, Zastava would finally introduce fuel injection and would also steadily improve and give the Yugo subtle new leases of life in the coming years. The philosophy was very much the same as the original Fiat Panda. Modernize it just a little bit, but keep the essence of the original intact. It's also important to mention that a lot of former Yugoslav countries took a long time to recover after the fall, and it took a while before a lot of them saw fresh new automotive imports from the rest of Europe and even Asia. Macedonia falls into this category neatly, so as a result, most people who had Yugos just held on to them, and some of them still do even to this day. As far as reliability on the Yugo is concerned, okay, even I won't blow smoke up your ass here. Some politicians are more reliable than a Yugo, but there was a bright side to this coin. Because the Yugo was produced in Yugoslavia, most countries that were part of the Federation could source parts easily. Nearly everything was locally produced, and there was also the small fact that the Yugo was everywhere. Pretty much every other family in Yugoslavia had a Yugo or another Zastava product. Was I alive during the existence of Yugoslavia and the reign of Tito? Of course not, but I have heard a multitude of stories over the years from both family and acquaintances who were. Still, it doesn't take a genius to realize that in a country like Yugoslavia, Western imported cars weren't really a thing. If you wanted to buy a German, or rather West German, or Italian, or even American car back in those days, you had to go to another country, find it, and then deal with the headache of actually importing the car to the SFRY. If you didn't want to do that, well, you were stuck between a handful of choices. The Yugo is one of them, but along with that were the Yugo siblings and cousins. The Zastava 101, or Stojadin, or as we call it in Macedonia, Stojeden, was the more practical 5-door liftback version of the Yugo. If you live in a former Yugoslav country, the chances of either you or someone you know having owned one of these in the days of Yugoslavia is astronomically high. Then there was the Zastava 128, which was the 4-door sedan version of the Yugo. Same thing about the ownership applies here also. And finally, there was the other automotive darling of Yugoslavia, the Zastava 750 and 850, or the Fitro as you might know it. This was pretty much a Fiat 600 built under license, and it was one step below the Yugo. If your family or acquaintances didn't own a Yugo 101 or 128, then they probably owned one of these. My dad actually used to do hill climb courses in a Fitro. Aftermarket stickers and everything. The remaining automotive choices that Yugoslavia had were the Zastava 1300, in itself a built under license Fiat 1300, and finally the Polski Fiat 126P, known as the Maluch in Poland, or as it was known in the Balkans, the Piglica, literally translating to little clothes iron. And that was pretty much it. Throw in there the Trabant, the Wartburg, and the Volkswagen Golf, which was built under license in Bosnia. And if you wanted to buy a car in Yugoslavia without going through the hassle of importing something West German or Asian or Italian, these were your options. And out of these, the Yugo and the Fitro were the preferred choices for basically everyone, but the Yugo even more so. The Yugo could seat 4 to 5 people, it had decent trunk space, it was light on fuel, and even more so if you did the ever so popular flex fuel upgrade, like basically all of Yugoslavia did. Sure, it might not have been the most reliable automobile, but it was incredibly easy to work on, and when everything was working right, the Yugo could take you just about anywhere. For a lot of Yugoslav families, they couldn't leave the hatchback at home and take the SUV on vacation, like so many families do today. If you don't take the Yugo, you're not going on vacation, dude. It's as simple as that. And now compare this to North America. By 1984, when the Yugo was first introduced to North America, the US and Canada were completely spoiled. You gotta remember that the United States' idea of a compact car just a decade before the Yugo went on the market was the AMC Pacer, whose base model had a 3.8-liter 6-cylinder engine. The Pacer wasn't very good either, but it was proof that America's idea of the compact car was very different to the rest of the world's idea, and that includes Yugoslavia. It wasn't just that though. Generally speaking, American cars, even some of the cheapest options, pretty much always used V6 or V8 powertrains, and they tended to have a lot more equipment, even the ones that had 4-cylinder engines. American cars, though not always great, offered a fair bit of perceived value for money. Now, there is the argument that the Yugo was never meant to compete with any of those cars. Of course it wasn't, that's common sense. But North America had something else. Import cars. Japanese manufacturers like Honda and Toyota enjoyed massive success in North America thanks in no small part to the oil crisis, which made it a complete nuisance to own a massive V8 powered car during that time. Not just because it would be compromised by the American manufacturers' bright idea to keep the same engine but to restrict the power massively, but also because you'd have to make frequent stop to gas stations which couldn't sell you any gas. Small Japanese cars with efficient engines as a result took off in North America, which is the reason why the US and Canada are such lucrative markets for both Honda and Toyota even to this day, and all of the others as well, like Subaru and everybody else as well. Of course, Yugoslavia wouldn't see pretty much any Japanese car until well into the 90s. The Honda Civic, the Suzuki Swift, and the Toyota Starlet, the Yugo's would-be competitors, simply weren't available in the days of Yugoslavia. Neither were most of the other European hatchback models except for the VW Golf, and that's only because the Golf was built under license in Bosnia as previously mentioned. The Golf was, as you might imagine, also more expensive than the Yugo. As a result of all these factors, citizens of Yugoslavia were pretty strapped for choice, so a majority of them just went with the Yugo. It may have been unreliable and it may not have been the best of cars, but it kept Yugoslavia mobile for decades to come. And as I said, some of them are still going strong today. The Yugo actually remained in production until 2008, despite Zastava not only introducing a would-be replacement model, the Florida, but also manufacturing and selling the Zastava 10, which, as you can see, was a badge-engineered Fiat Punto. Sadly, in 2008, Zastava closed for good, and we would never see another car from them. The Zastava factory in the city of Kragujevac in Serbia now belongs to Fiat, where they currently manufacture the 500L, and Fiat has also said they plan to manufacture some of their upcoming electric models there as well. Due to the cars that the Western world was used to, they couldn't really look at the Yugo the same way that Yugoslavia did. For the Americans, the Yugo was just a second-rate VW Golf wannabe, trying to make it big on the market. But for Yugoslavia, it was the car to have. And that's going to be about it for this video, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel. Also follow me on Twitter. There will be a link in the description, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.